Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday. Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 773rd New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the immense pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation and reading featuring Rachel Valinsky, Marian Chudnovsky, Kamelya Omayma Youssef, and Cole Swensen. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenapehoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we are speaking from. And now to introduce today's guests and host. Rachel Valinsky is a writer, editor, and translator based in New York and Paris. Rachel is co-founder and artistic director of Wendy's Subway and an editor at Primary Information. Rachel's criticism appears in publications including Artforum, Art in America, and Bomb. She's also translated literary and critical texts and has curated exhibitions, performances, and programs at the Kitchen, the Queen's Museum, and elsewhere. Rachel teaches art history, performance, art writing, and critical thinking at NYU and the New School. Marian Chudnovsky is an archivist and art worker from Queens, New York. She is the librarian at Wendy's Subway and program and administrative assistant at the Center for Art Research and Alliances. Her work focuses on archiving independent publishing and activist movements, and her first book, Peer Review 2, Publishing the Present, was published by Wendy's Subway in 2022. Kamelya Omayma Youssef is a writer from Dearborn, Michigan with roots in Lebanon. With an MA in English from Wayne State University and an MFA in poetry from NYU, she currently teaches poetry at the City College of New York, edits poetry manuscripts, and co-facilitates the workshop Habibi Futurism. And our host today, Cole Swensen, is the author of 17 volumes of poetry and a collection of critical essays called Noise That Stays Noise. A book of hybrid poem essays, Art in Time, was published by Nightboat in 2021. A former Guggenheim Fellow, she has been a finalist for the National Book Award and has been awarded the Iowa Poetry Prize, among other recognitions. She has also translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from French, and won the 2004 PEN USA Award in Literary Translation. And it's such an honor to have you all on the NSE today, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Cole.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Chloe and Fong and everyone at the Rail for making this possible. And thank you to Wendy's Subway and all our participants today for being here. We're really excited. It's just such a wonderful, multifaceted institution, and we're looking forward to hearing about it in detail. But we always like to start with poetry and getting that work out in the air. And I shouldn't say poetry because that's a big category. Writing. We like to start with that. So Marian's going to start us off with a reading, and then we'll hear from Rachel, and then we'll go into the conversation. So Marian, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. I'm going to start off with reading from a few of Wendy Subway's publications from our Passage series, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more later. This is from Americon by Nico Vela-Page. Editing bits of me away, not that gesture, not that face. My youngest sibling wonders if they were cutting, keeping me in place, another's grace. But my voice mispronounces, I cut, voice escapes my grasp, cut, flickering fingers, too glamorous, cut, me, flamboyant me, hide, me, and their vision. Still learning to be body among rocks, volcano made hot by hot, sinking earth into earth. When great gray stone sky floats on lake, mirror is complete. And thick reflection grow rock soft. broad as shores lilting, trans is blanket, an envelope, space carved out where I and my loves move elemental, unhurried by borders, expanding lenticular to woo, glacier cut mountain, heavy water through rock, saying hill here, river here, lake here. So the cutting floor, shaping the body is the work. And then next from an Eros Encyclopedia by Rachel James, also from the Passage series. A tree extends into what it can grow to tall. It bends through decades of wind. It claws onto a cliff, making do with little soil. It reaches down into the dark. If I say everything, I will be unhappy. But what is the right amount to say? I grew up twirling in a circle with raised arms. Twirling was thought to be a conduit, if not to God, to a sense of being in the correct location. A shadow forms out of blocked light. First planets, then clouds, then mountains, then trees or buildings. Then my arms raised and spinning. A friend told me once he went home with a girl. This is when we were called boys and girls, and they undressed and kissed, and he lay her down, and she flipped him over, and she laid him down. She sat on him, started writing him, and asked, whose house is this? And he said, your house. And she asked again, and he answered again, and so on. Whose house is this? A flesh resting uneasily between ambitions. Who lives here? A woman and her audience. Where is she? Here. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us on this program at the Brooklyn Rail today. I'm just going to read from also two books from our document series, which is a series we'll also talk about probably later, where we publish time-based artists in print. So this is from first a book called The Book of Na by Na Mira. And I'll read from a section in the book called Timestamps. This one is 2001, 04, 10. Back at the anarchist bookstore I work at in high school, as if I never left, except now I don't believe in do-it-yourself, in your or self. In this bare field, the small zine, external text written by Yumi Lee, a teenager from Kansas, arrives with a photocopied image from Teresa Ha Kyung-cha's dictee on the cover. She breaks language, and language is law. I go out and find the book used half off, covered in tombs, death stuttering, spitting, repeating, jagged lineage of martyrs, origin hissing, an electromagnetic line not visible, not redaction, empty pages ring a decibel of void. Some parts of the text are nothing more than a raised flesh, texere. Refusal plays its puncture. The held breath balloons into consciousness, into another animal's verb, talisman not given, but going. I do not understand her as intimately as I do not understand myself. And then this is from 2021, 12/26. And this is Teresa Ha Kyung-cha on White Dust from Mongolia. Character 2 is at the moment of the return to retrieve events past, marked within the chronology of time, which functions as punctuation as marked points in time. The return remarks the locations, points in memory, repeat the past sequences. And then I'll read a little bit from Ronaldo Wilson's Carmelina Figures, also in this series. A theory not bound by terror and fear, suffering and shame. Lineage is different from rhetorical sequence, a logic to attempt to describe the impossible. It isn't pain when I laugh so much as when it appears. The flashlight held up to any skin reveals too a transparency, sight line through the human hand, light as paper and fragile. So too my trek, red as race and history, the realm of the exilic. As urgent cross-hatchings render skin after the skin, quick thin lines saturate. thing that I think emerges between forms, not a better representation, nor an authentic one, but one that is immutable and always in formation. Gritty lines, loosening finger in the tread, I swim. What does it mean to listen? To drawings, to look close at pencil, moving between vision and the quick of a story, a place where silence resides and there is less conversation and more meditation, a theory where what matters, a tap, tap. Psoas, ice, hip bone, mouse the draft back. Lock, I smudge, the hair orb fingerprints with pure graphite. Back, pain of seeing. Lynch, refract, next vista, iPhone, target, a tree instead. Echoes stop. Synthesize the bullseye, and again, tenor, latex skin, bark, graph, fight for your form. I sift my way back through flecked layers. The smallest vibrations matter too. Emit, mark, palpable trail, your shadow, axis, figure. Thank you.
Thank you for getting us started with just such a great array of work. Really wonderful. And it immediately gives us an idea of the range that you deal with and some of the values that support the whole program. And it is just such an interesting interweave of different modes of bringing people together, putting their work out there. And I think you have a series of images to show us that, and are going to maybe start with just trying to give us a sense of the scope. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we can just have the images rolling a little bit. Thank you for that introduction, Cole. We just read a section of, or a selection of texts from books that are across two different series, but beyond publishing books, we also are an arts and literary nonprofit organization. We have a reading room, writing space, and also function as a publisher. Some of what you're seeing on the images now are just shots of some of the different spaces we've had. We're now in our third location. I'm calling in today from our current space in Bushwick. This is on screen now, our second space, which was right next door, actually. And then previously, you saw our first space, which we opened in 2013 in East Williamsburg. We have a reading room here. We also have public programs, talks, readings, performances, reading groups, workshops, and within the space, we host this library collection of over 3,000 titles, and also do some of our in-house printing here for some books that we publish. Marian, maybe do you want to share a little about reading rooms? Or...
Yeah, totally. I mean, so sort of the general, as you know, Rachel and Cole have mentioned, we do so many things, but a lot of what we like to think about is that the core of our programming is about the social life of the book, right? So where does the book come from? What are its lineages? And then whose hands is it going to be in? How can we make sure that they're accessible? And how can we think about supporting the entire sort of movement of a book? So reading rooms were a series that we started doing and continue to do in collaboration with other organizations and institutions, including BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. You're seeing on screen some images from our reading room at BAM. And what we did in reading rooms and continue to do is to think responsively about another organization's programming. So, for example, when we were invited to do this curation of titles at BAM, we're thinking actively about performance, dance, dramaturgy, and wanting to really think about having a collection that is as accessible to their sort of publics as possible, right? So, of course, it's about having dense theory books about drama if that feels relevant, but also an artist book or a zine or something that people feel like they can pick up and really get to know. I'm the librarian at Wendy's, and I think about that a lot, right? Having a big scope of books and who feels like they can pick up what book and what might they get from it. And as part of BAM, we also invited in other independent libraries. So it's, again, kind of building a community around this collection and inviting them to contribute ideas about what we might want to have on view. And the beauty of reading rooms is also that we get to keep these books as part of our permanent collection. And so they add to that never-ending number of 3,000 plus titles that Rachel mentioned earlier that you can sort of see behind her in our permanent collection. And yeah, I think this is really a way for us to continue to be part of a broader ecosystem of bookmakers and artists and writers who specifically like to work closely with and support other independent publishers. It's, you know, a very expansive kind of practice, but it's also a small world, and it's always good to continue to sort of build relationships. So much of librarianship and bookmaking is, I would say, in relation to each other. And, you know, that's something that Kamelya, of course, can touch on as well. That's so rooted in sort of Kamelya's practice, or Kamelia's practice specifically in her title. Yeah, and reading rooms, again, are something we're continuing to do, but at the moment, it's sort of the main focus is our permanent collection, which is housed in Bushwick in our storefront space. Yeah, and these are titles.
Kamelya, do you want to maybe say something about Wendy Subway from the point of view of a writer who's been in, rather than one of the organizers, but someone who's reached out to them?
Oh yeah. I hope my sound is right. It has been, so I'm so sorry. Let me just see this. Yeah. Working with Wendy's has been fabulous. First, I'm like I came to New York kind of like not understand. I was new to everything over here. Wendy's, for some reason, through like friends, through community, I come from like my friends and I in like the Detroit and Dearborn area. It's like a very DIY kind of a space, but like politics and art live together, and I would often be surprised and kind of naively maybe surprised when I would go to art spaces that didn't make political safe spaces. And so Wendy's, I think for me, was really exciting it was the first book award that I'd been inspired to even submit to, especially because, and I've been kind of fumbling around here trying to find an accordion book that I've been making in practice with a collaborator and friend of mine, Jannah Hamid. Why I say that is because my book, A Book with a Hole in It, was supposed to be like an experimental accordion book. That was like, the vision for it was that it would be an art book. And Wendy's found a way to like both honor this project that was like totally an experiment, pulling fragments from my journals, something that was like, that challenged the one-page poem, and of course the accordion book practice I learned about from Etel Adnan. And Wendy's just lives in the space where all of these things kind of happen together, not necessarily in a centralized way, but all throughout the books that I think we're seeing on screen, and through Wendy's Subway's practice. I don't know. So that's like a little flag waving, if I may, but also just in terms of like, and as a writer, deadlines are very, you know, they're both like an alarm that's like, you know, flashing in our heads, but also Wendy's, I feel like, has honored the human that made the work, and they've been like really patient and loving and caring. Like this was like an emerging writers book award that I got, and God, did they make it a safe space for somebody who's an emerging writer trying to like find her footing in New York City. And so it's just been really, and to also make a safe space to publish a book about, I think, gendered violence in an experimental way, while still like not asking me, while still like respecting the holes in the story, I think, and respecting consent. I think that allowing a book like A Book with a Hole in It to exist, and like working so hard to provide space for it, I think is I hope to see more experimental work. I know, I mean, I don't even need to hope, because Wendy's already got it. Yeah, but I'll pause there. I can say so much more.
I noticed a slide going by that had 3 categories: document series, passage series, and fellowship program. And I wondered if you could tell us the differences and how each one interacts with perhaps a different population or a different orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started publishing in 2018, and there are also outside of this, outside of these series, there are some books that don't really fall into these categories either. So I'll just say that as a caveat to these series we have. But we really started our publishing initiatives around trying to think about, as Marian said, the kind of social life of the book, which is a term that we borrowed from friends of ours who ran a series of publications called The Social Life of the Book, or SLOB, in Paris. And they use that as a kind of overarching term for this series of publications that was thinking about sort of like publishing ecologies and the sort of networks of independent publishing and sort of creative practice that are produced by those networks. So in large part, our publication started out coming out of our programs as ways to think about, how to catalyze like the energy that was in a workshop, for instance, or how to build out of a residency where we had like an artist in residence or a library in residence or group in residence doing research and sort of programming here, how to build that into a publication. And then towards 2018, we started to formalize some of these things into some series that were really new at this moment for us. So the document series is a series we began in 2018 that in many ways builds out of some of the reading rooms Marian mentioned around performance. And it's a series that invites time-based artists, so artists who work with performance, choreography, dance, theater, video, what have you, to think about their work in print. And so a large part of what we are sort of challenging ourselves and artists to do in this series is to think about, questions of translation in a way across media, across forms, and how to carry across questions that are central to like a time-based practice into, in many ways, a very time-bound experience of reading. And so we've had an amazing opportunity to work with artists who we've commissioned to make a new piece. Sarah Magenheimer, for instance, is a visual artist. We invited her to write a book, to propose a book for this series, and she wrote a novel. We have also had the opportunity to work with artists who are touring a dance choreographic work, for instance, and to think about how to adapt that work into print. And in many ways, a lot of this is about, kind of building and bridging audiences and finding ways to engage a reader who might not be going to see a performance on stage, or to offer audiences who could not make it to a live event another way to engage with the work. And during the pandemic, this became especially important when so many artists whose livelihoods around the kind of gig economy of performance was really kind of at risk, and being able to offer, I think, another space in which their time-based practices could sort of unfold. So that's one leg of the programs. We also have the Passage series, which is a series that comes out of 2 open calls, and Kamelya's book is part of this series. We have an open call every summer where we have a book prize with a guest judge who will select one title to publish. And then we also have the Carolyn Bush Award, which is named for one of our co-founders who passed in 2016. And this is a an award that Kamelya received that is geared at an emerging writer who has a manuscript in progress and really offering kind of editorial support and also professional sort of development support over the course of the year of their working on the publication. Do you want to say, Marian, a little maybe about the fellowship program and the fellowship series?
Sure, yeah, I can talk about the fellowship. I actually started at Wendy's as a fellow in 2019 and never left. But the fellowship program is a way that we support people who are interested in the work that we do. It's evolved a lot over the years, but typically it sort of draws in folks who have their own writing practice, art practice, or are interested in arts administration, library work, and things like that. And it functions as a way for these folks to get involved with the organization, to get to sort of do hands-on engagement with our library, get to know our authors, engage in the editorial process, and things like that. It's a sort of duration program that it depends on the particular work of the person and how long they want to be involved in the organization. I will say a lot of fellows tend not to leave. Much of our staff is composed of fellows who stuck around. But we also, as part of the fellowship, you have the opportunity to publish a book with Wendy's Subway. So it's also this really beautiful moment where you're engaging in the administration of Wendy's Subway, but also you have the time and space to get to be in our library and make work that is based off of the things that you're thinking about and learning in community at Wendy's Subway. So that's something that we do, and we have some upcoming fellowship chapbooks, which are very exciting. Those typically are printed in-house, which is also a lovely way for someone to sort of get to see the entire process of a book. So, they can be supporting on the copy editing for someone else's book, working on their own writing, and then assisting in the production and distribution of their own title. It's a really beautiful way to have this kind of continuity. And they're always really special sort of small chapbooks that are documents of what someone was thinking about as they were working at Wendy's Subway and also continuing to be an artist and a person out in the world.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Kamelya, how did you find out about Wendy's? You were in Detroit and Dearborn. Did you find out about it there, or what after you'd moved to New York?
Okay. I found out about Wendy's, I think when I first, because I came here to do the MFA at NYU, and I was it through, the thing is, tracing back the Instagram, like the specific, what's that word? Like a Rube Goldberg machine, like however you get through to the person, to Wendy's. I think it might have been through Miran Arsanio. So I'd met at Pratt when I had interviewed there. And so, and also probably my friend Jenna had recommended them to me. Who I do a workshop with right now. So when we were part of a reading group actually in Dearborn, and we were part of a writing group that was very private and met at a library. So a lot of the practices, I think, are like pretty decentralized. So it's really exciting. These things are happening in spaces all over the world and the country and this land. And so like it's, and I think a lot of like, it's not who you are, it's what you do. And what Wendy's does is that work in practice. And I still feel like I have so many questions for Wendy's because just the evolution of, and also the name is very exciting. Cole, do you know how they got the name? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Whoop. I've heard a couple different stories, and I would love to hear the real one or even the real three. Do you want to tell it?
Oh, it's not me, it's Rachel.
No, this is great. I feel like my version of this story is evolving over time, and my answer to this question is increasingly becoming there is no origin myth. But I think when Wendy's was founded, we came together as a group of writers mostly who were looking for community and a place to write together. And there are, I guess, some one theory about the name Wendy Subway is that the original location we visited was between a Wendy's and a Subway. I mean, first I'll just dispel like any like edifying, readings of this name. It really does point to fast food chains. Or if that's what you have imagined, then it's possibly true. But it also, maybe more importantly, and there's a longer version, also was a kind of late night joke around bringing together kind of opposing factions at a moment when another space that we were looking towards in New York, kind of literary space that also had a sort of food related name, was kind of breaking into two like opposing political factions. And so I think this was like a 3 a.m. diner joke about like, what would it be like to bring them together? And I was not at that meeting, but that name stuck. So it stuck long enough that it was too hard to change. And I feel like, yeah, maybe Kamelya, I don't know if that's the story you know, but or Cole, if that's the story you know, or maybe it doesn't matter so much anymore, just that it, there's something kind of nice about the name not being didactic in any way, shape, or form. And so you have to have a conversation about it. And that's often like a conversation starter for us. So yeah.
The beauty is people will come up to us at book fairs and ask if one of us is named Wendy and if we wrote all the books. So at least that gets people laughing.
Great. And all of these works that we're seeing, clearly visuality is an extremely important book design, and all the images, the very textual things, the marks. And I know that both you, Marian, and Rachel are strongly involved in art history and visual arts. Could you talk about how that works, how you make sure that the continuity, the incredible variety?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is just that the artists we work with have incredibly sort of diverse and interdisciplinary practices. And at no point in working on a book with an artist we're inviting to be part of the program are we kind of interested in molding that into a form around into like a kind of one specific template or one kind of design idea. The artists we work with are inspired by and working across many different genres. And that's in this series in particular, the one that you're seeing now, but also in the Passage series, which is a hybrid genre poetry series. We're interested in specifically the intersections between visual arts, time-based art, and writing, and how those kind of mutually support and sort of engage each other. And we also work with incredible graphic designers who have amazing like kind of intuition around these different forms that the artists we work with express themselves in, and in particular have kind of intuition as well around materiality. I mean, just an example, Ronaldo's book, which I just read from a little bit earlier. Ronaldo's a writer, and maybe most people might know him as a writer, but he also is a performance artist, and he also makes works on paper and visual art, and the works on paper he makes are on incredibly thin, sort of opaque, semi-opaque paper. And so we worked with Dorothy Lynn to design this book, and she really kind of took that material sort of substrate as a design conceit to think about questions of density, of opacity, of translucency, and really build that into the book as a kind of strategy of accumulating images over time so that they also kind of bleed into each other and sort of across this like very thin paper she used. So there's just a lot of like knowledge and intelligence in a way about not just all the different forms that writers are working in, but also what space of possibility the book offers for bringing those together, right?
Right, and to Rachel's point about Dorothy's gorgeous design for Ronaldo's book, it's also thinking about the book as an art object in and of itself, and how we can sort of honor the material of the visual artist that we're engaging with, and also make sure that the book is an art object that is made to be touched and to be shared and to be circulated. And I think that that is really important to this, and something that I think about a lot, and I know Rachel does, and we all do, is, you know, how do people get to engage with this work? Someone who might never have had the chance to, for example, see Namira, who Rachel read from the book of Na earlier. If you maybe never got a chance to see Na's video work or to see her perform, all of a sudden you have this gorgeous object that's designed with intention that gets to render and represent that work and circulate around the world in ways that traditional art objects don't. And I think that's the beauty of artist books and one of their, you know, many redeeming qualities. Yeah.
And Kamelya, clearly your book also has visuals. We saw that one amazing photograph in one of the slides. There we go. And I was noticing also not only the photograph, but the active typography and the different languages, perhaps. I can't quite see it on the screen, but I wondered if you would give us your thoughts on this collaboration between visual and verbal, and the collaboration between you as a writer and the book designer as a visual artist.
Oh yeah, this so I guess the intention for the book was for it to carry and the excerpt that I'll read will also talk about this a bit. But the goal for the book was it to be able to, it's an elegy. And so I needed the book to do the oratic work of like honoring by feeling, and to do so as simply as possible, and as clearly as it can within the current constraints. And so, oh, it was such a journey. I mean, I was excited to work with our designer Rissa, because she had designed some books for Etal Adnan, who I'd been doing research on. I was like, okay, let's go. I'll be a designer mate for Etal. Let's do it. And God bless her and rest her and all of those fabulous things that she gave us. But then we had totally different visions. And so it was like a real process in terms, because yeah, I knew that the book had to have my handwriting on it. And that's the title is in my handwriting. I knew that there was an Arabic title. And also the Arabic is only one page in the book because they're all excerpts, fragments from my journals. And for better or worse, my most intimate language with myself is English. And then occasionally I will journal in Arabic if the spirit moves me to, and I can't help it. And I just am fearless. And then I go in, because I was born and raised in the States. And learned Arabic through various means, including like Islamic school and an Arabic school at the local community center, and also like formal study. Anyways, so Wendy's, and then also there are certain pages in here that were transcriptions of poems that I'd received in my dreams. And it was like immediately upon waking. So the like 4:30 a.m. Inscription that was in the journal got to be in the book. And finding a way to to make a book that, I don't know, I'm going to make an Atal reference that I wasn't really anticipating to make, but you know how the book Sea and Fog just kind of is like lapping waves the lines are like lapping waves on a shore that just make a safe space for you to be and think, and while also waiting in somebody else's thoughts. I wanted to make something like that, to because the book, like I said, is an elegy, and I knew that I existed in a state of waiting, and a state of waiting to speak in the English language, and a state of trying to tell a story in a language that will hold guns up to the story, and invade the story, and colonize it for oil perchance, and so I needed to make something protected by an aura. And so that's really what the book is. My work beyond this book is like so tonally very different. And so I'm still looking for homes for those poems, or figuring out even if those poems I've entirely received from my MFA, and maybe a book with a hole in it is my natural form and I must proceed in monostichs. And book as sanctuary. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I fear I've gone on too long, but I could talk about this for so long. So may I talk about this a little bit, actually? And what, Rachel, I haven't even talked to you about this yet, but I'm just gonna say it. So one, the book was supposed to be visually, it was supposed to be an accordion book that was all like one piece of like paper flesh that, and like was able to like fold over. You could connect page 1 to page 60, and so like defying linearity. And so that was the vision for it. We couldn't really do it in a trade publication and also get the numbers that we needed, not too expensive. But what I do now is I do a workshop with my friend Jenna Hamid, who's in the chat here. And we did this workshop in December, and it was incredible. I'm still working on a portfolio, but you can I'll put my website in the chat if folks, or Instagram really is where we'll do things. But we would like to host it. We are working with some local studios in New York to continue to host this workshop. We've hosted it in Sunset Park. We've hosted it, a variation of it in Detroit. And we'd like to bring it to Brooklyn very soon. I've never heard a quieter room where people were pouring through their journals and pulling fragments to put them on accordion books. And so I don't want to give away spoilers, so I'll stop there, but it's really empowering to be able to make something on your own, to move from ideation to materialization in the matter of minutes. And it's been an incredible pedagogical tool, and a spiritual one as well. And Wendy provided space for that.
I have a quick follow-up on that. I ran across the term Habibi futurism. And is that related to the workshop, or is that a different project?
That's a different project. That's a different workshop. But we basically, it's a friend of my friend who's coming for a residency in New York for 3 months. So maybe whoever wants to host us for a Habibi Futurism New York workshop, we're happy to do it. Levon, they're a weaver and they're fantastic. But we just do kind of like future memory tunneling by immersing ourselves in futurist art, and then trying to figure out solutions for the or visionings of the future together, based in social responsibility, communal values and responsibility.
Great, sounds good. I bet that will happen. The one theme that is clearly very central to Wendy Subway, has come up again and again in this conversation, is that of collaboration. And clearly, designers are collaborating with writers, performers are collaborating with text, etc. But I know you also collaborate with a number of other programs and institutions. That always sounds like such a cold word, but other groups, institutions that are maybe literary based, or maybe music based, or maybe theater based. And I'd love to hear more about that and how you see that as helping you overflow your bounds.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think in some ways the collaborative ethos of Wendy's is like defining of its origins and, kind of continues to this day in various forms, both internally, like as a staff and a team. And I saw a question in the chat about horizontal decision-making, which we can certainly talk more about. But this question of collaboration for us, I think, has in large part first been about learning and about learning what other people are doing, other organizations are doing, other institutions. I mentioned, or Marian mentioned the reading rooms earlier, and one of the things we did with the sort of second reading room at BAM was to invite other libraries to come here and have their books on our table. And then another thing we did out of that was to invite those libraries that we had started to sort of build knowledge around and have conversations with about how they catalog and what kinds of books they collect and what kinds of communities they activate through their spaces. That turned into, in many ways, the model for our residency program, which was, in its kind of initial stages, really about bringing a library that maybe had temporary housing or wasn't like in a specific location or, was digital, bringing it into our space as a way to sort of collaborate with that group and also to give them, space and resources to do their work. So I think that, that has sort of really carried across and in looking and learning and sort of researching all of these spaces and all of these projects and other organizations, for me, what's been so incredible is learning how collaborative models of kind of alternative artistic production, how collaborative frameworks, for collective practice in a way, are really offer spaces that are radical in many ways, that are supportive, that are experimental, and that have a lot to sort of learn from each other too in terms of resources and sort of like mutual engagement. And so that's one way that it can happen. Obviously, the book is another form of collaboration that involves lots of people kind of coming together and doing things and having this product, right, that comes out of it. But programs are also a space of collaboration. Obviously, with a workshop, we have lots of people collaborating in a space to share space ideas, writing practices together. But in some of our programs, we're also very interested in working with other organizations across the city or elsewhere to just like get the word out about what we're doing, and also, as I said, kind of learn from each other and from our audiences. I don't know what else we can say about that. I mean, collaboration is both like it's so central, and it's such a like ubiquitous, I think for us, like practice and method. And also, as Kamelya was pointing at, even just in talking about a design process is something that's challenging, and that's also like potentially agonistic in like a really positive and generative way, that allows us to like rethink our ideas, our preconceptions about how things should be, and to kind of offer a space for how it can be when we think together about it. So yeah, very core concept and fundamental, impulse for us.
And it seems very related to the question that I know is going to come up about the horizontal decision process, but maybe we'll save that one for the Q&A. I wanted to ask you about internationalism, because it seems that I was noticing the residencies and the Quick and the Dead. There's an international representation in both of those. I noticed translation coming up in a number of the projects and publications. So I wondered, is that accidental? Is that intentional? Was it foundational? How does internationalism, and where do you see it going?
I would say it's definitely an intentional part of our process. I think that the beauty of internationalism is that you can see the interconnections between other publishers, artists, writers, libraries that are doing similar things. And it's really beautiful and heartwarming to see and to get to hear from folks from all around the world that are really thinking about similar issues, but then also to try to understand how we can continue to build solidarity in, the ways that our political situations may differ and the way that we have different resources and different modes of access. I think, with Publishing the Present, which you're seeing on the screen, that was a specific archival project that we developed in 2020 in response to sort of the beginning of the pandemic and uprisings for Black lives. This was something that we really came to with a lot of intention to say there are all these gorgeous resources that are circulating in this moment that are necessary, and who is going to collect them with intention, and to make sure that they're preserved and are resources for everyone. And so this is a project that we worked on between 2020 and 2021. The archive is closed. And again, there's all sorts of questions about when we get to say a moment is over, but that is sort of the delineation of this particular archive. And of course, the scope of it is naturally limited by the fact that, there are only so many people and so many publications that we can possibly amass, but we tried to be as international in our scope as possible and to try to bring in as many different voices and to sort of understand the way that independent publishing was operating, for example, in Hong Kong in 2020, and how that might be different from a publisher that was working in Providence, Rhode Island, and how can they continue to speak to each other, and how can we form networks that last beyond this particular moment, and that get to support each other, and all the slippages that happen in that too, of course. I think we sometimes think of internationalism as utopian, and it certainly is an ideal to continue to work across borders as expansively as possible, but to acknowledge also that there are genuine differences in the context that a lot of the people that we're working with are operating in, and just to be honest about that, and then to try to say, okay, how do we move forward? How do we build solidarity? How do we share resources with that in mind?
Yeah, thank you. And I was thinking, obviously, the political is social, the political is artistic, the aesthetic is political are all so important to your whole project. And that the political aspect of recognizing the internationalism as not a smooth utopia, as inherently an arena of difficulty and cross-grained moments, I think seems to come out in a number of your publications and events. So it seems really valuable.
Yeah.
Seeing the word community, I wanted to also hear about, I was thinking of the bi-weekly writing sessions, which seems to focus on the local and really offer something immediate, local, and emergent. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So writing night is something that has existed in various forms over the years. We have a physical space, and we're very happy and lucky to have one. And so I think one of the things that is so important for us is like the really kind of the possibility of collaborating and also having a creative practice and community. And so the writing night started just really as a way to get bodies in the room and write together. I mean, that's also how we started as an organization, was writers wanting to write together. So it's a bi-weekly event. It started in person during the pandemic, moved to online. And I think that was a really, I think that was a real lifeline, both for us and for a lot of people who were just looking for, a Zoom call to drop in on once a week or once every 2 weeks, and have a consistent group of people to write with. And it's essentially like a free writing session. You can kind of write whatever you'd like, but there is also always a prompt offered. And the prompt can be, is often, something that's proposed by our team that's staffing, and in particular, Tilleen Tran, who is usually running writing night, although I'm filling in for them today. But we also, at a certain point when we were kind of moving into the writing night online, really reached out to a lot of writers in our community to offer prompts. And so those became things to kind of push the writing night along. And now we do writing night, we do it hybrid. So it's by 6:30 today, there will, I think, be 20 people in here writing, and then also some people on Zoom, and I have to figure out how to make that happen. But and it's a really amazing opportunity. You know, it's not something that is like product or goal driven at all. Like I think people have met through this program, and maybe they entertain conversations about their writing outside of those 2 hours a week. Maybe they don't. Maybe they never see each other again. Maybe they do, but there is a kind of informality to it that I think is really generative, and also is sort of like also kind of accountability space to just show up for your own practice, right? So yeah, we get good feedback on it. I think it's a really nice, I'm terrified of like writing with people and also of writing to a prompt. So personally, it's a challenge, but I learn a lot from the people I've been doing it with.
And Kamelya, have you ever attended one of those or had experience with it?
Big, unfortunately, no. But that's primarily like reporting from adjunct life in New York. Yeah, it's like pretty dire trying to like find ways to survive here. And so I think that right now I'm like settling into like a post MFA round where I've got to like be able to support my life as a writer, like support my writing practice while also finding ways to survive and without really any other means to support me. And so I think just because we are hearing about strikes and we're hearing about just the reality of like the publishing industry, that's my biggest constraint that prevents me from being able to engage in literary community outside of like more emergency situations where it's like I absolutely need to write, so my friends and I must get on Zoom right now and write. And so the complete answer is no, but there are structural reasons behind that I'm hoping to remediate collectively and individually.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And for everyone who's involved with Wendy Subway, the competition for time in your lives, having to make a living, having to do that. And I'm wondering, how much that inevitability actually fuels all your activities, just to reach out to offer others what you have found so necessary yourselves.
I mean, totally. I think it's a huge part of what we do and what we're constantly thinking about. I mean, just to go back to writing night, it's so often that when I stop a writing night, everybody is coming from their day job and they want to have a space where they actually get to do this. And it feels so important. I mean, I'm zooming in from my full-time job right now. Like, we all have to find the small ways to continue to sustain these things that are our practices that mean so much to us. And it looks, of course, very different for many different people. And I think that's something we're all navigating at Wendy Subway, right? Of course, it is labor, and that needs to be acknowledged, but also it's something that we do as creative practice and as community building. And we'll talk about horizontal decision-making and all of those things later in the Q&A, but it's something we continue to think through together as we are art administrators and professionals in other parts of our lives, and also building this space that has a real history, but we have big hopes and big dreams. And I think sometimes we get a little too big for our britches because we're just so ambitious and we just love it and want to keep doing as much as we can. But I think it does really fuel the work. We're all people out in the world and get to bring those sort of references and ideas and ways of engaging back to this shared space. And I love to hear about all the different ways that people are making it work for themselves, even when it's difficult. Like what brings you back to this work, I think is really, really powerful.
Great. That might be a good note to use as a segue into the Q&A. But I do want to make sure that if there's any last things that any of the three of you would like to say, we get a chance to hear them. Okay, then we'll go to Eleanor and you can take us through the Q&A.
Thank you, Cole, and thank you so much, Rachel, and Marian and Kamelya for this super enriching and inspiring conversation. It's been so amazing. We've got some questions from the audience, and the first one will be from Amy. You should be able to unmute to ask directly.
Wow, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I find what you guys are doing just wow. I am an artist, and if you're interested in working with Wendy's Subway to publish a book or a fellowship, or you'd like to understand how to get more information about applying for grants to self-publish, how would we get in touch with you? I've checked the website, but I didn't really see that much right now. But anyhow, I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. There are so many ways to kind of plug into Wendy's, and whether that's submitting to our open calls for a publication that you're working on, or even if that's not the venue, we're also always really happy to meet with artists and writers and talk about their projects, and maybe offer direction around other publishers or other opportunities that are out there for publishing. There are so many great resources too in the city around self-publishing and artist books that are kind of in our orbit that we're always happy to orient people towards. But beyond that, we also have our membership program, which is all online. And we're also open to the public during the day. So you can always come by and meet whoever's here. Today it's me, but not most Thursdays it's me, but not, but then we kind of rotate our schedule. And like today, someone came in who wants to do an Urdu poetry reading night and asked me about that and told me about his writing group. And I told him to submit an application and we would probably host that program. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of get involved, but you can also email info@wendysubway.com and with more specific questions, and we're very happy to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. That was a great question. Thanks, Rachel, for that answer. Our next question is from GE.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Cole, and everybody at Wendy's. Thank you for spending some time so generously with us today. The question was that we talked a little tiny bit about earlier is, can you talk about how horizontal decision-making is a really good way to be responsive, not only to the community, indeed, of course, but also to foster growth of project. And also, I thought of books as not as a completion upon publication, but as the beginning of the conversation. And I think the horizontal decision-making carries through all the way through an ongoing process that hopefully continues and continues. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that idea of books as the beginning is so beautiful. And I think really something that we think about a lot at Wendy Subway. I mean, we've talked about this throughout this conversation, but we do a lot of different things. We publish books, we work with writers, we have programming, we have a library. And when you allow for all of those things to not exist in hierarchy, there are these beautiful sort of webs that come together. Everything is really deeply speaking to each other, but when when you sort of falsely divide it, it's I don't think it's necessarily the most productive way. And in the way that we think about how we relate to each other as an organization, we're a very small team. We're also all close friends and think of each other as collaborators. And so really trying to be in constant conversation in this way that doesn't necessarily divide our work, but actually allows for us to see commonalities and see ways that we can support each other, even if, for example, I'm working on a library initiative and Rachel is working on copy editing or design layout or something like that. There's always ways that we can continue to be in conversation. But Rachel, I'm curious if you have more.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of your questions are so related and so helpful to hear also. Like the life of the book starts when a writer feels a desire to write and then, you know, continues way past the publication of the book. And for us, that is really like scaled at the level of like human interaction and relation. And so I think, yeah, for us, like the work doesn't end when the book comes out. It begins in a different form and is about kind of continuing to foster those relationships with writers and to support their work in any way we can moving forward. I think as an organization that now can use that word organization, but really started as a collective of people kind of coming together, and over the now 10 years that we've been open, nearly, we have changed, you know, composition internally at like an administrative level, let's say, several times over. We've also changed our structure in terms of our operations, like how we function. We've also changed our status as a legal and financial entity, right? We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization now, but we didn't start out that way. And so all of these steps have been taken both with a lot of intentionality and discussion about what that means at a kind of structural material level for like how this social formation functions internally, and then also you know, how we want to situate these decisions about our structure within the larger field, say, of you know, arts organizations in New York or nonprofit organizations, or and how we kind of see ourselves or don't see ourselves in relation to those organizations and institutions. I mean, Cole, you said something about, you know, institutions is kind of a scary word. I agree, but it also, institutions are made of people, right, with history and with you know, backgrounds and knowledges and sort of approaches that they bring to their work. And I think our goal has really been to figure out how, if we are to be an institution or an organization of any kind, how we kind of organize around what matters to us as values that we can then take out into the world. So the idea that there, you know, that we do a lot of work with other people, but we couldn't do that if we didn't have kind of language and sort of intention around how we relate to each other, right? That's like the first place where these interactions happen. And so on a really basic level, you know, we meet once a week. We have definite, you know, horizontal decision-making has not meant that we are, you know, that we understand that some people have more or different kinds of work to do, or that there's kind of different ways in which labor is distributed. But we come together around the kinds of decisions that impact each other and our activities, and like what Wendy's is doing at any given time. Yeah, there's just a lot of like internal focus around how that functions.
Oh, thank you so very, very much. That really helps. I want to see an autobiography of Wendy's Subway someday. Thank you.
One day.
Thank you, GE. That was such an amazing question, and thank you for that answer. And I think now we're going to pass it over to Kamelya for a concluding reading. Or if anyone would like to jump in first with any other last words, please go ahead.
Right, so take it away, Kamelya.
Thank you, everyone. This is a very exciting conversation. I'm going to try to speak louder, but this was really exciting conversation. And I'm so glad that my book gets to exist in a space like this. And that's at this intersection of all Cole, I've been hearing your name for years, from my mentor, and was reading your work for a long time. Wendy's bringing us here. Brooklyn Rail, thank you for existing. And so this is coming out of that. So thanks for this home. Today is also the first day of Ramadan. So I'm gonna start there. Ramadan, I am thinking, my body and my desires, my want of a cigarette, of Dunkin' Donuts, water, coffee, a bit of weed. I will not eat. I want this Ramadan to wake at dawn, the Quran or the poets, the dew of my mind live, this life, this body, a prayer, a supplication, not an asking, but a saying, with love, I am free, they, the moments, beautiful amidst its rampant. I woke up, the emptiness that wakes up with me. A butterfly appeared, maple tree, the blossoming, garlands dangling earrings, they, heavier with each day of spring. I'm flipping through the book. Desire overturns the entire ship, washed over by waves, a log on a beach somewhere. Take the nearest exit. The trick here is to go back into the theories. Our bodies kept getting in the way. A map of salt. I am restless. Of love, of machinery. Is doubt the true ruler of all things? The ambivalence, the could-be state. I am also thinking. Let them be themselves. Give them all the body. My chest, the open swinging cage. Let them circle me with tongue hanging out. For now, there is between us salt and flesh you have eaten. Do you come back to me? Poetry is inventory and prophecy. It is a name with a whisper inside. Feeling, understanding, affect is not feeling. There is another knowing of the self beyond knowledge. It is the silent G in gnosis. Yesterday, we danced. A book as the cover, the title, a billboard, a context, a hand, a subway, in transit, in place, set against, hands holding, a palimpsest, a place in time, the age of its technological, a flat transactional object can also carry a spirit, dead or alive, the dead that do not need to live, alive things that never had died, that refuse, that resist, shrill as alive objects, touch, a gilded, words stretched, an aura, our origins, something about origins, keep you company. This book exists. Existence is the birth of a transformational thing, shrilling in language, a way of a written. Yes, indeed this, and yes, indeed this is a lie. If some language is, maybe all language is. I want to feel her aura, smudged, a burial for her. How she may have changed the world, my father, my family, the village, the trees, she, that book, of herself. Someone decided she needed to die, is not told. There is a world missing from this world. I am wondering, I am remembering, an aura, that piece, an elegy. The book in my hands is an aberration. Our social relations, the state of communality, as it is, way we relate to what the book does. The electricity there, what is it, if not a shrilling thing?
Thank you, Kamelya. That was beautiful, beautiful way to end, and a beautiful way to end just what was a great, great conversation. Thank you so much, Rachel, Marian, Kamelya, and as always, Eleanor and the Rail, Fong, for making it all possible. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have to echo Cole's gratitude. It's been such a special conversation, and thank you for the beautiful reading, Kamelya. Thank you again, Rachel, Marian, and Cole as well. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program to make these daily conversations possible, as well as supporting our archive, where today's conversation will be up shortly on YouTube. And for the past 22 years, the Rail has provided a platform for arts, culture, and politics in our publication and public events like our NSE. Check the chat for a link to donate to support the Rail. And please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Louis Osmosis and Andrew Woolbright on the event of Louis Osmosis recording artists at Amanita Gallery. We will conclude tomorrow with a poetry reading by Jalen Strong. And you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much. Thanks, Cole.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have an
amazing
Thursday.